What is up, my friend? Welcome to episode number 86 of the Anthony John Amos podcast. In this episode, I want to mix things up a bit and bring you an expert who can give you some of the best relationship advice there is specifically for entrepreneurs. So if you're married and you want some insights in how to take not just your marriage, but like all of your relationships to the next level, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Anthony John Amos podcast, the one and only podcast designed to help you become unstoppable in life and business. My name is Anthony John Amos. My friends call me AJ, and my goal with this podcast is to help you remember who you truly are so you can maintain your center in the chaos, embody your potential, and unlock freedom in your life and business. That being said, let's get into today's show.
All right, welcome back. Now, before I introduce you to today's guest, I want to let you know about my Shift 101 community. Like, if you love the stuff that we talk about here on this podcast, then make sure you're part of Shift 101. It's full of free trainings on topics like online marketing, sales, and a lot of ways to create massive breakthroughs in your life and business. And honestly, the content that is posted inside that community is better than what a lot of people make you pay for. And I know that's easy for me to say because I created the content, right? You don't tell you that it's going to shoot you straight like I always do. It really is good content. I mean, that content inside the community, when you execute on some of the stuff that I have shared, Dana Heston has shared, I definitely know it can add six figures to your business if you're running like a personal brand type of business. So head on over to ajamix.com/community to join. It's 100% free, and it's full of amazing other entrepreneurs who are all in the personal branding space, meaning they're a personal brand. They're coaches, course creators, marketers, consultants. I mean, they're leaders who are really committed to creating their best lives. So again, just head on over to ajamix.com/community and hit that little request to join button. And I know you're going to love that community and the training that you're going to find inside. So with that being said, let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Dana Heston, and she's one of the wisest relationship coaches I know. She's an incredible person. She's been married to her husband for 37 years now. Together, they've had 10 children. It's so crazy. Her first calling was to homeschool all of her children, and she's been doing that for over 30 years now. She has graduated 7 of her children so far, and her path toward coaching has been kind of a convoluted journey, which really kind of began by seeking help for her own parenting, and you'd imagine so after having that many children. And she has multiple certifications under her belt, but most especially, her extensive experience raising 9 children has really positioned her to bring a unique wisdom and a unique perspective into her practice. She's truly passionate about equipping and empowering others to connect with their core design and from their own true essence to really create exceptional relationships. So with that being said, let's bring her onto the show. Dana Heston, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Great.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you. Typically, I have like outlines and all of that. I have nothing. So we're going to have an amazing conversation. And some of the things I think that would really benefit people who listen, because I haven't talked about this stuff, and you're I believe, one of the experts on this, is like marriage and parenting, like relationships.
Boom.
So a lot of what we've talked about previously on a lot of the different episodes is just like running a business. We've talked about drama triangle. We've had your son come on, talk about drama triangle. But we really haven't talked about how like marriage is and parenting impacts one's personal power, their core power, and how it impacts business growth. So I think that would be fun. So let's start there. What have you found is like the impact of the relational game on just the business game and the life game?
Well, the number one impact is that you have to be in alignment. And where you get out of alignment the most readily is in those closest relationships. If you're not in integrity in your marriage, as a parent, you leak core power all over the place. And you don't have authority in the marketplace. You don't have authority.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And what about those marriages that were like, oh, we don't have any problems. We never argue. Like, is this good? Do you think that's normal, or do you think it's two people who are, I don't know, really not leaning in potentially?
Yeah, I think that there are, like, I don't argue with my husband. We don't argue, but there's so much more to a good marriage than not arguing. You can have a relationship that doesn't argue, but there's also that thing of iron sharpening iron.
Mm-hmm.
But you want a little bit of the polarity because that sparks some life, right? But there's also that place where if you're not vulnerable, if you're not allowing yourself to be seen, you're not going to have any conflict because you're just in a facade and it's just personas and you're just doing a dance with somebody, but it's not your real passionate core design showing up, and it's no fun.
Mm. Do you think a lot of people are afraid to really show up inside, whether it's with their children or whether it's with their wife or husband? Do you think a lot of people are just afraid to fully show up because they're afraid everything that they have is just going to fall apart?
I do. I think that most people are living their life basically fear based, and most of their energy is going to protect themselves from, in a way, to protect themselves from themselves because they're so afraid that like their heart isn't as pure as they want it to be, that they're not as good as they want to be, and they can't go inside because they're so afraid that what they're going to see inside is going to disappoint them. And so they end up just shutting off, walling off their heart and living their life in this zone, this safety zone that isn't in integrity. It's not connected to their core design. They can't play full out because they aren't accessing the depths of their heart,
Hmm.
but they're living in this safe zone. I think most people are.
What does that safe zone look like for most people? Like if we could pull a broad brush and just swipe it, what do you think that safe zone looks like for most people?
Well, honestly, I think it looks like one foot in drama most of the time, where they have maybe not full blown drama, but think about you said you've talked about this on the podcast before. So think about that victim position where I need somebody else to resource me. I don't have the resources within. I can't look within. I don't believe I have the resources within. So I'm constantly looking outside for somebody else to resource me. And it looks like, well, you should, or it looks like the government should. And it all comes back to I'll be okay when somebody else does something else that they need to do to make me okay. And I think it also can look like the drama and the hero side of it's not a win for me, but I'm going to rescue you. I'm going to prop you up because I kind of need you to need me. Because when I'm doing something for you, I'm sacrificing myself at some level, then I feel like I'm worthy. I feel like I'm okay. I'm kind of getting some identity from that. And so it feels so noble because I'm like, I'm sacrificing myself. But it's not core power and it's not a true win. It's not an open-hearted, empowered love position. It's basically one foot in drama and not able to go inside, not
Mm.
to to find my identity inside myself. So I have to prop my identity up by serving other people and lifting them up.
So good. What does it look like to find our identity inside? I think a lot of people don't even know what that looks like or where to start.
Oh, whew. This is my passion. This is my passion. So we want to get out of that drama, right? We have to go inside, but it's like this black swamp of fear. It feels like if I look inside, I'm going to die. Like I'm really going to die because I'm just so not good enough. And everybody has their own words for it and their own context for it. But it's that I could die if I look inside. And it feels like this black swamp of fear, and it's just off limits. Really, that fear is like a membrane. And when you pierce that fear and you actually get the courage to look inside, you get inside there and you find out, on one level, you find out that your heart is beautiful. that you are beautiful. You find out that you're doing the best you can do. And there's so much compassion that you find for yourself on the other side of that fear. But then at a deeper level, when you go within, you begin to find that place where you're actually connected with your source. You're connected with your creator, and it's infinite, and it's light, and it's love, and it's you, right? It's you. And that's where you find your unique design, the fingerprints of God that are on you that nobody else carries. It's your unique design. And you can begin to connect with that and trust that.
Mm.
So what it starts to feel like, it feels expansive. And it starts to feel like, I find a lot of times initially when people start to touch that for the first time, they almost go through withdrawals in a way,
Yeah.
because drama place is so addictive. We're so addicted to the adrenaline of the drama. We're so addicted to that passionate, well, you should, the anger, the hit we get when we can blame somebody else. And we feel alive when we get that hit, right? So when you let go of that and you go inside, and initially it feels restful, it feels peaceful, it feels like I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay. And so all of that adrenaline kind of energy starts to dissipate. And then people are like, that's a tricky place where people can begin to feel that addiction pulling them. They want a little bit more drama. They want that hit. But when you stay with it, you really connect with your source and with that infinite place, then you begin to feel creative, and you begin to open up this expansive creativity and passion. But it's not drama. It's not, well, David Hawkins would say it's power versus force. That addictive thing is the force, but this creative, expansive energy is power. It's power in a pure, beautiful way.
Now, why do you think people are addicted to the force? Like, is it because they're getting some egoic payoff of like they feel important, or they feel significant, or they feel safe because they're controlling, or is it something different?
I think the addiction piece is just the adrenaline. I think it's stress. I think it's a lot of it is biochemical, and it's adrenaline, and it's stress, and it's just addictive. I do think there's ego involved, and different people have different postures on the ego. And so there's a little bit of that control. Everything that you said can be involved. But I think a lot of it really just comes down to the adrenaline and the chemical activity of what's going on. It's kind of like, this is an analogy, but it's kind of like carb fuel versus keto fuel. They're kind of, the carb fuel is kind of the adrenaline stress junkie thing.
Nice. Well, and even that, some people like this will stay with the carb fuel, like carbohydrates fuel and ketosis fuel, ketones fuel. Some people who are closed-minded and all they've ever known is their fuel source from carbohydrates. If you're like, yo, there's another way of eating where your body can run on these thing called ketones, they're like, absolutely not. That's absolutely ludicrous. You'll die. We must have our gluten and our carbs, right?
Right.
And that's a potentiality. It's a potentiality. And another potentiality is
Absolutely.
ketones. And neither one is right or wrong. They're just different options. But so
Right.
oftentimes people don't know that the other way is safe. I know when Sarah and I first got married, this is probably maybe 2 or 3 years into our marriage. I never really argued. Like in the culture I grew up in, if you argued, it meant like you didn't love somebody. You weren't being respectful.
Right.
Well, her being Romanian, lots of people don't know this, but Romanian is a Latin culture. They argue, they yell, they scream, they're all colors. And she was like, her belief system was like, if you don't argue, then you don't love somebody. And so we had these two
Oh
totally
my.
different cultures. Culture is so real. People don't talk about this enough, in my opinion. Culture is fucking real. And so we had two totally different cultures. Where I was like, my conception was like, well, if you do that, then you don't love the other person. And she's like, but if you don't do that, then you don't love the other person. And so it was like two totally different things.
Competing commitments, right?
100%. So with that, I think people definitely know the drama cycle and the arguing and the friction and the stress. What does the other side look like? What is that possibility? Because I don't think enough people know what that even looks like.
Right. So in that victim place, you're looking outside and you're looking for somebody else to solve your problem, right? To resource you, because there's an inherent belief, it might not be conscious, but there's an inherent belief that you lack the resources, that you're not resourced. So on the other side, you're a problem solver. You can take responsibility and you can begin to problem solve. And so I think there's two postures or two keys, I call them. And I mix metaphors because I also talk about pedals on a bike, right? There's two pedals on the bike. One is taking responsibility for yourself, your own thoughts, feelings, and actions. And you alone take responsibility for that. And then you surrender everything else. You surrender it. So what other people think, it's not my business. I can't take responsibility for what you think. I can't make you think anything of me, good, bad, indifferent. It's not my responsibility. I have to let go of that. And there's also things that aren't other people, but things like the weather and acts, acts of God, nature, things that they just are. I can't control them. So we have to surrender and let go of everything that's not our business. But we take 100% responsibility for our business because we're empowered and we're capable of doing that. And it is so empowering when you recognize, wow, I'm responsible for how I think and how I feel and how I act. Nobody else can make me think anything. Nobody else can make me do anything. It's so empowering. And you become vulnerable because you're taking responsibility and you can speak the truth about your business. You can take responsibility for what you feel and you can be vulnerable and say, this is what I feel, and just speak the truth. Just be honest.
And what impact does that have then on the person or the relationship? Like what does that look like then?
Okay, so when you're in drama, you're really not in touch with what you're feeling. You can't go in there. But when you get to where you take responsibility for what you're feeling, then your full being is showing up with that other person. So you're standing face to face. And if the other person is also able to come out of the drama and take responsibility for themselves, it's so powerful because you're there, you're in integrity, and it's not a mask. It's honest, it's vulnerable, it's raw, but it's real. And then I can really let you see my heart. And when I let you see my heart and you see my heart, then I feel seen. But I will never feel seen if I hide my heart from you. Yeah. Never. You can be looking straight at me, you can see me and you can know me, but if I am not consciously allowing my heart to be seen by you, it will never land. So it begins to look like this dance where we're authentically dancing and both parties feel seen, they feel heard, they feel known, and then they can co-create in a powerful way, which I'm super passionate about because I feel like that co-creation, it's not 1 + 1, it's an exponential, powerful thing. Right?
Totally. And I think in today's culture, a lot of people are missing out on that. It's like, I don't know how to say this, but it's almost like in the container of a committed relationship, whether that's with a man and a woman or a woman, a man, it doesn't matter to me. But inside the container of a committed relationship, there's this this growth that happens between two individuals that I'm not 100% convinced yet. Maybe I will be at some point in time differently, but currently I'm not convinced that that level of growth can happen outside of that container of commitment.
Yeah, I don't believe it can. You want to hear my framework on it?
I would love to.
I feel like it's an Easter egg, or it's kind of like the secret door in the game of life that God hid in our game of life. That when we find that committed relationship and we can be authentic and empowered in this place that we're talking about, I think it's like a shortcut back to the essential unity, back to that place of unconditional love, peace, and joy. I think that in that place of committed relationship, when you are, in a sense, it's like I kind of hesitate to use these terms because I know it's Judeo-Christian and I know that it might trigger some people, but for me, it's this captures what I'm trying to say. It's like when you're naked and unashamed,
Yeah.
like not just physically naked, but when your emotions, when you're naked with your emotions, when you're naked with your desires and with your passions and with your design, and you're not like putting masks on your design, but you're allowing yourself to be seen by another person. And it requires commitment, because that kind of vulnerability, it's not safe to go there without commitment. It would not be, we're not created to go there without commitment. We have to create the container for unity. We cannot make unity happen. We can't force it. I cannot force my spirit, my soul, my body. I cannot force myself to come into a resonant unity with any other person. I can't force it. The only thing I can do is create the container, create the circumstances where unity shows up. I can make it welcome. And part of making it welcome is that committed relationship. So when I'm dancing with my husband and we're creating that container for unity to show up, then it shows up, and that is a transcendent experience that it's beyond logic. It's not logical. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't say logic is bad. It
Sure.
doesn't. It's just in the David Hawkins has the different levels of frequencies. It's a frequency beyond logic.
Totally. Like, let's just go back to Judeo-Christianity. I don't mind if somebody judges us for using Christianity.
Okay.
It makes sense to me. God talks about like where two or more are gathered, there I am with them. So it's like when two people are in that space, there is another space. And this isn't about Christianity. This is about a spiritual principle. There's a space where two people can enter into. Course of Miracles talks about it, and they call it the holy instant, the present,
Yes.
right? Where
Yes.
those two people are then joined with something. I would call it consciousness or God or universe, source, whatever name you want to put on it. Doesn't matter to me, but there's this thing that you tap into that allows you to transcend the
Yes.
current happenings to create quantum evolutions and quantum leaps that you just can't access without it. I don't know how to put it in any other way. And if that offends somebody, I don't care.
I think it might be possible for an individual to eventually come into a resonance with source, with God, and experience a sense of unity with God.
Totally.
I think the shortcut that God's given us is that even without going through all of that evolution or all of that growth or whatever, that when we create the container with another person, that we transcend and experience that unity. It's amazing. And we can, I think it's the shortcut to transcendence.
And my other experience has been, I feel like when I did my psilocybin journey, I talked about this in episode 5, I believe it was episode 5. I feel like me by myself experienced the totality of consciousness which you really can't even ever, when I'm saying this, experience the
Yeah, totality. It's irrelevant.
But I experienced this thing that was beyond space and time, that was pure unconditional love, where all things were perfect, right? Consciousness.
Mhm.
But I didn't experience that in my relationship. And what I've learned in my relationship is just because I had that experience, which was great, it didn't allow me to know how to integrate that experience. And my relationship has given me some of the greatest lessons on integrating consciousness and transcendence into the human experience. Does that make sense?
Right, it does, because horizontally, you're allowing yourself to be unconditional love. What does that look like? In a journey, a state of consciousness, it doesn't translate into daily actions. It doesn't translate into making your bed and flushing the toilet and brushing teeth, right?
Exactly.
So this is where in a relationship, you get to be unconditional love in this container. And you get to work out, how does unconditional love flow through me in this context? When I'm triggered and I'm frustrated, how does love flow through me here? How do I align with love? And how do I allow love to flow from me? How do I extend love in this context? And when you're extending it in this committed relationship, like this is the closest, it's the most, it's the most crucial relationship. But when you learn those lessons here, then when you move out towards your children and towards your friends and toward other relationships, it's easier and easier.
Totally.
Just be unconditionally loving and be love.
So let's talk about unconditional love a little bit, because I just got off a call. That's what I went over on. And we were talking about unconditional love. He came from a Judeo-Christian background, conservative. And so he's gone off that path and then doubted that path and kind of come back to it. And is now really struggling a bit on some things because of the idea of unconditional love. Because after all, Jesus died on a cross, and therefore he should be the savior for his family and his friends, because that is unconditional love, supposedly. So I want to unpack, so we're all on the same page, what is unconditional love? Because my experience has been most people's definition of unconditional love is actually conditional love. And it's nothing more than an agreement. If you do this, then I will give you connection. If you don't do this, then I will not give you connection. That's not fucking unconditional love. It's not. And it will not work inside a committed container to create unity ever. And yet that's what it seems like this culture is indoctrinated on, of what their definition of unconditional love is. So do you mind sharing your perspective of what unconditional love is inside the container of a committed relationship that actually allows us to create unity and transformation?
Yeah, I'd love to. So what you're talking about is one foot in drama. That's where I think most people live.
Yeah.
And it's partnership. We have a clear agreement with each other, and it works. It works in a partnership. It works with business partners as well as with marital partners. Like, you hold up your end of the bargain, I'll hold up my end of the bargain, and we have a good relationship here. But it's just a partnership. It's a designed alliance. But when you move out of drama, where you're not doing that dance in drama, and you move to this place of unconditional love, I think the key piece for me is probably what I call the law of the mirror.
Mm.
And that's that everything that I see in my husband, and then by extension, my children and my friends and everybody else in the world, whatever I see in them that's triggering me is actually in me in some way. And finding that place of unity, actually, it's the back door of unity. It's like, that's me. And how can I love? When I love you, I'm loving me. When I love me, I'm loving you. And so finding that place of healing where everything is a cry for love. Everything's a cry for love. Yeah, so that is the biggest key for me. Is the backside of it. Unconditional love looks like loving the shadow in a sense, and by bringing the shadow back to God, back to the light, back to integrating into source, because that separation, that whole concept of separation, is what needs to be reconciled. And we're the part of us that's committed to being separate, to standing alone, to standing apart from somebody else. That's the part that needs to be reconciled and loved.
Mm.
And that's what it looks like with my husband when he's committed to his story, right? And I can see that story is not helping him. It's not about me being a savior and trying to fix what's broken in him. Like, there's nothing to fix. There's nothing to fix. It's me loving him where he is and allowing him the gift of his experience and truly believing that his experience is the perfect path to bring him back to that awareness of unity and the essential oneness, that God never left him, that he's not guilty, he's not shamed. That's his story, right? And say for me, those places where I feel alone, where I feel abandoned, where I feel not good enough, right? When he loves me, he's not fixing me. It's not about fixing. It's just about here on earth, where I was saying we get to be love. It's a shortcut. I could be in a transcendent state. I could be in meditation. I could be in prayer, and I could connect with God, and I could have an experience where God tells me I'm enough and it heals my heart. And that's definitely happened for me. But when my husband comes alongside of me, even before I know to pray, even before I'm recognizing my story and is loving of me, it's the shortcut. It heals my heart in ways that it would take longer and a different kind of effort to have that kind of healing.
What does that practically look like when he comes before you ever need to give you love? What does that practically look like?
Trying to pull up a couple of experiences. Sometimes it looks like him seeing me when I don't see me. Like, I'm doing some new things with my business, and I'm on the cutting edge, like the bleeding edge of my comfort zone and my capacity. And one of my clients had texted, and they had these amazing results. It was euphoric, the results they got. And I was sharing it with my husband, and he shared with me, and it was really cool. But he turned and he looked at me in the eyes, and he's like, "That's exactly what I expected." And I was like, whoa, I'm not sure that that's what I expected of me. I'm not sure that I saw this vision, and he saw it, and he was holding that space for me to come into that place and to bring that kind of value to the world. He saw it, and he was holding that space for me.
That's awesome. Do you think people in a committed relationship can create this union and co-creating desires if both parties aren't willing to take radical responsibility?
I think that to a degree, yes, I do. And I'm going to go back to the Bible because there's a point in the Bible where God said that an unbelieving spouse would sanctify a believing spouse. And for me, I see that the higher the frequency, it calls lower frequencies up. So the highest frequency calls the lowers up to resonate with it. So I think it could be challenging because I think one party is doing a little bit more of the heavy lifting. And I'm not saying that in a drama term. I'm not saying it that they're rescuing or anything like that. I'm just saying that in a way, they're being the open-hearted one, and love is flowing through them, source is flowing through them, and and it can be discouraging because it feels like it's landing on like a parched ground, and the other party, the spouse is like absorbing it, and it's just dissipating, and they're not getting the iron sharpening iron. They're not getting that polarity to dance with in the same way. But that said, I believe that it definitely is possible for when one person gets out of drama and then they just continue to elevate and elevate. I think it's definitely possible for a marriage to experience some of this transcendence, even if both parties aren't fully playing full out or fully even on board or have the awareness or the consciousness of what's going on, right?
Yeah, totally. I
One
believe
might
it
be
is.
along for the ride.
Yeah, I believe it is. I'm experiencing that personally inside of my marriage. I feel like I was the one who, my story of it anyway, was I was the one who stood up and was holding space. And it came into like a hard conversation, one where I was like, hey, look, I am willing to no longer hero you. I realize I've been heroing your emotional happiness and I refuse to do it. So if you want to be miserable, fucking be miserable. I refuse to fucking hero your emotions. And that was like a huge breakthrough moment. But it was like, for me, line in the sand, hello, earth to spouse, rise the fuck up. And then it's been this constant her leveling up, right? But my question is there a paradox in that where somebody is going to lead, and scripture talks about casting things onto unfertile ground, right? Is there ever a time where somebody is trying to lead, and somebody is so addicted to drama and their poor me victim stories that they refuse to rise up? And is there a time where the most loving thing to do is to end that committed relationship because one is not willing to go in a direction that they're wanting to go any longer, and we're trying to lead, but it's not happening? Is there a time and place for that? Or, because some people do believe this, so I'm curious because I don't know the answer, and maybe we'll see where it goes. Or is it like, no, you should stay inside the committed union because this is your lesson to truly learn unconditional love?
Yeah, there's probably a paradox there. I don't know the answer. Like, I don't know the answer. I think that people bail sooner than maybe that there's a lot of riches there that they're not unpacking and they're bailing on.
I would agree with that.
I think that you've attracted whoever you've attracted for a reason. And we go back to that law of the mirror. And I go back to even like the Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian doctor. Like, if you heal those things in yourself, what in you is not playing full out? What in you wants to stay addicted to drama? What in you is lazy? And like, you heal that and you're in a committed relationship, it's going to affect your spouse, right? So only you are going to know when you can stand like in 100% integrity and you are clear that you have done everything and that you're free. Only you can come clear on that. And if you bail before you come clear on that, you're going to keep attracting the lessons that you get to learn because it's still in you.
Totally.
And you keep attracting it, right?
Totally.
Right.
So good. Why do you think most people bail too soon? Just because it's uncomfortable and they don't have the commitment to honor the agreement that they put in place because it's a cultural norm? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think we've been enculturated and we don't have examples of what that looks like, what that feels like. It's super scary. And our ego is telling us all kinds of stories about like we're never going to be fulfilled because we're in drama, because we think that our fulfillment is our happiness, everything is tied to our spouse. So if my spouse isn't perfect, then I'm going to have a shitty life. That's drama. That's just straight up drama. And I think a lot of people buy that line, they buy that story. And if you don't buy that story, then you've got to take responsibility. And it's work. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's worth it. There's, like building a business is work and it's hard. And the only reason I do it, the only reason you do it is because there's a reward in it, right? But if I don't have a concept of what that reward might be, I don't have hope that if I do the work, there's going to be a payoff, then why would I do the work? And our culture doesn't have, like I see hardly anything that paints the picture of the payoff, that paints the picture of the reward for the investment you make here. And so if you don't have some way of framing what that reward would be and having hope, it's really hard to make the investment.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I think people stay too, even like the reward thing makes sense, but I think people play small rewards. Like, for instance, maybe their reward is, oh, we have better sex, or we have better conversations, or we have better connection, or something of that nature, which are all great things, right? But to me, there's like a different level of reward. It's like a vision for a painting that you want to paint. And it's different things for different committed couples, but I don't think enough people, and I struggle with this because I have no reference point to land on. So I'm kind of in the dark on it of like, well, what is that vision for our relationship? Like, it's very easy in the business game to be like, okay, well, this is my vision for my business. This is my mission statement. And this is what I'm committed to. Like, it's pretty easy to have that North Star. But to do that in the relationship game, for me anyway, it's a very foreign concept to try on, to think like, well, what would that be? Because at least for me, when I look at my grandparents, a lot of them were married for 60 plus years. But the relationship was just kind of like, my grandmother always served my grandfather, and was there co-creation? Maybe, I don't know. My judgment of it was there not, and it was just more of we're miserable together for 60 or something years. That doesn't seem very exciting. So I don't think a lot of people have that thing to land on, or even the potentiality of that bigger vision. Do you have any wisdom to share on how people come to that realization of what that vision is?
Yeah, I think what's helping me create it is acknowledging that it's spiritual, that it's not physical, it's not material, it's not something like, well, we can travel the world together. It's not like, it is truly a spiritual transcendence. And that experience is touching something that's eternal, that's not bound by time. So that helped me at first, just to recognize, okay, I'm not making goals for my marriage. My North Star for my marriage isn't finances. It's not travel. It's not better sex, right? I'm looking at something more transcendent. And I have a reference point for transcendence because in general, my design is pretty mystical, and I have a framework for transcendence. A lot of people don't. A lot of people really don't. And especially in this culture that we're in now, they just don't. So that is one bridge that can help you move to getting in touch with a vision that's transcendent, is acknowledging, okay, it's spiritual. What does spiritual mean? And I think one way to help you begin to get in touch with what that means, for me, I looked at the map of consciousness with David Hawkins, and I began to realize, okay, 400 is that resonance for logic and for like truth with it, that capital T, like, but transcendence is like 500 and above. So it has to transcend logic. It has to even be outside of logic. And so that helped me to begin to kind of categorize it in a sense, and kind of start to nail down what is it that I'm really after here, because I want something that's extraordinary. I want synchronicity. I want things that are results that are way beyond what I would have expected, right? So those are the two things that probably helped me the most, is acknowledging it's spiritual and transcendent, and then grounding that. The map of consciousness kind of helped me ground that and give me just a concrete way to talk about it and think about it. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. What are like 2 or 3 of the biggest mistakes you see couples making that's keeping them from really stepping into their ability to be that sovereign creator inside their relationship and having that relationship fuel them rather than drain them?
Well, one of the first things I think of is partnership. Like they get so committed to our marriage as a partnership, which translates to, as we were saying before, the designed alliance, the 50-50, you do your part, I'll do my part. And they just get committed to that. And so they don't even realize there's something else possible. So I think that that's a huge mistake, to just get committed to partnership and not open up yourself to something else as a possibility. You said 2 or 3 mistakes. I'm going to have to think about it a little bit. That's the first one that came to me.
Awesome. Awesome. What's the second one?
I think here's another one, and this has to do with the drama, is that framework of the story that I need anything from my partner. Like being committed, like I need something from my partner. They have to be a certain way or I'm not going to be happy. And both partners being committed to, well, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, and they're committed to being what the other partner needs, and they think that that's unconditional love. And it's not. It's disempowering. You think about it. If I need my husband for something, I am so disempowered. It's a mistake to be committed to that kind of framework.
And my experience, at least as a man, I can only speak from my experience on this one. Maybe I'm blanketing all men on this one, but I'll speak from my experience. If my wife has a need from me, there's like, I can tap in. I don't want to give it to her. Like I could give it to her, but I don't want to.
That's because you're the type A, right? It's 'cause you're the rebel.
And I'm learning to like dance with that. And sometimes it's a win for me to give her what she needs. And sometimes it's a win for me not to give her what she needs. So she learns how to source it. So I'm not becoming the crutch, because there's a paradox on that. Like I don't really study this, but went to an event in Missouri, Austin Holt, because marriage matters. And he talked about this thing called the Imago Therapy, where when 2 people come together in a relationship, subconsciously, we choose a partner that has the gift to give us, and subconsciously they can't give it to us. So it's kind of this really kind of weird dynamic. And then once you can start uncovering like, oh, well, this is my shadow, and this person starts uncovering like, oh, this is my shadow. Oh, the thing I'm terrified to give you is the thing you need, but I don't want to give it to you subconsciously. So I'm consciously going to choose to give it to you because that's the most loving thing I can do, is give you this gift. So it heals a part of you. And that dance goes vice versa. And so within that, there's still a paradox, I think, because it's like, if you just give it to give it to give it, even when it's not a win, well, you're back to heroing that person. And so it's like, we have to learn how to really check in and know, like, when is it a win to give and when is it a win not to give, and giving them the gift of their own experience so they learn how to stand up and do that dance. I wish it was as black and white, but it's definitely not when it comes to relationships.
And if you can create a distinction between projecting and extending. So sometimes giving it is projecting, like you're projecting on that person that they're disempowered, I'm going to hero you, or you're projecting, oh, I have to be this way. Like it's a projection.
Yep.
But when it's an extension of love, when it's not, and this goes back to that vulnerable problem solver, back to that naked and unashamed, when you can own in your core design on, this is what I'm feeling, and that loving part of me just wants to extend to you, then it's life-giving, right? But when we're projecting and it's not life-giving. I'm feeling a little bit sad because I don't feel like I can make a clear distinction between projecting and extending, but it is so powerful. I'm just starting to experience it, and I haven't found a way to language it really well yet. But
what do you mean by extending? I understand projection. What do you mean by extending?
Extending is So think of like you are being love, and extending is from that place of love. It's just like a plant growing outward, like your core design extending outward. It's totally in alignment with that place in you that is love, that is light, that is it's giving. It's growing outward. It's an outgrowth of your core design. And even the Imago Therapy, where you're talking about that thing in you that is what the other person needs.
Right.
It's growing out of you from your core design. It's growing out of you. That's extending.
Awesome.
It's alignment. It's pure. It's giving without hooks, without expectations, right?
Totally. So it comes down to, it sounds like the difference is like giving as an overflow of your purpose because you're fully sourced and full, rather than trying to give from something you have nothing left to give, which comes with baggage and expectations and things of that nature.
Right.
Distinction. Awesome.
Yeah.
And how does this whole game spill over to parenting children?
Oh my, it's the same song, second verse. Except that I think children even more, that law of the mirror is, I think is, for me, it's been even more powerful with my kids to see those things in my kids that trigger me, go inside. And also the empowerment place of seeing my children as being empowered beings, fully resourced. Like when they were created, they were fully resourced with everything they need to be who they're called to be. They're fully resourced. Even as a young child, knowing I have a responsibility to them, but I don't have a responsibility for them, even as young children. And raising them in this context of you're powerful, you're resourced, you've got what it takes. So this is that place we were talking about, like a husband and wife or a couple where one's not really playing full out and they're kind of addicted to drama. It's similar with a child. As you're raising a child, I find myself in this, it's kind of a mama bear energy where I find myself protecting this space. Like, I'm going to be okay, whatever choice you make. I don't care what choice you make. I mean, I want you to make certain choices, but I'm going to be okay. I don't need you to. Whatever choice you make, I'm okay. So I'm not sourcing my happiness from your choices. And then I can hold this space, this vacuum, as it were. And it takes energy to hold this vacuum, but I'm holding this vacuum for you to step into your core power and rise up. Because there's so much in our culture that would rescue you.
Totally.
I dance with my 11, 12-year-old son right now. This dance of him just becoming just lazy and not stepping up into his core power. And that dance of like, I'm holding this space for you to rise up. And there's oh boy, I could just talk about this for hours, AJ. There's just so much here where you're bringing both a mothering aspect where you're nurturing and that fathering aspect where you're applying productive pain.
Yeah.
But it's not about you. It's not about you. You're not doing it because you need a certain outcome to be okay.
Sure.
Right?
Totally. Let's talk about energy and then we'll wrap up. Because you talked about it takes a lot of energy to hold that space for a child. I also believe it takes a lot of energy to hold that space for the committed relationship as well. It takes a lot of energy to hold the space, especially if you're a coach, for clients. It takes a lot of space to hold it for yourself, to hold it for the business. How does somebody have the energy to hold all of that space without depleting themselves?
Well, you don't if you're doing it in your body or in your like your soul. I call it your soul. You don't. The only way you have that kind of energy is the transcendent connection. When you go within and you find that part of you, I call it your higher self. Some people call it soul, some people call it spirit. Language, but it is real.
Yeah.
It's part of you that knows that you're connected with your creator, that part of you that can tap into the resource that's infinite. It's an infinite resource. And you have to tap into that. Otherwise, you're finite. If you're disconnected from that, you run out of gas.
And I'm finding personally, I know how to tap into that when I'm alone, but to tap into it in the heat of battle, that's a new edge. Any advice around that?
That's the shortcut, right? That's the shortcut in the heat of battle, right? So advice around that. I'm going back to the law of the mirror. Like, if I know that I'm connected to source and that there's that infinite higher self in me, there's that infinite higher self in you. Mm-hmm. Standing here in the heat of battle, and I go back to, what do I really want? What I really want is that connection with your higher self and my higher self. And I'm going to come back to that space. Mm-hmm. This situation in the heat of battle, I don't care if you agree with me or not. I honestly, I have opinions. I have a lot of opinions, but I recognize they're just opinions, and I don't have to win. I really don't have to win. I want the connection. So reminding myself in the heat of the battle, taking a couple deep breaths, tapping in, what do I really want? What do I really want here?
Awesome. What I really want is my daughter to not drink Clorox. And she's like, but I want to touch it. And I'm like, let's go adventure somewhere else. But I want to touch this. Hey, we have a whole box of toys, but I really want to touch this. Stop touching the fucking Clorox, for God's sake.
Why is the Clorox where she can touch it?
We just bought a house. And there are things out that do not need to be out. And we're working on it. We're working on it.
So when her back's turned, it goes away.
Exactly. There's lots of things in this new house that are out on the porch and in the yard that don't need to be there. And we haven't had any time to go there to start cleaning it up and getting it all child safe like this place is. There's no Clorox here.
It's easy when they're kids and it's Clorox. It's harder when it's like they're teens and they're wearing things that you can't just put up.
Totally.
Awesome. But then you at least have a conversation at that point.
Totally. If you could go back in time and give yourself some younger wisdom that would help you collapse time and get results faster, what would you tell her?
I would tell her, stop being committed to this idea of separation, to the idea that you are separate from everybody else and you're a silo, that you're separate from God and you're separate from every other person on the face of the earth. It's just your story. And find a way to tap into, to learn, to discover, to find this place of essential unity, the principle of essential unity, that you're connected with your source. You're not separate. You're connected with every other person. You're not separate. That is the one principle that has flipped my world upside down.
So good.
No longer committed to separation, committed to essential unity. It's night and day.
Thanks for sharing it. You have a couples program. You're one of the wisest people I know in the relationship game and the parenting game. If people are looking for relationship coaching, relationship advice, whether it's parenting or with their spouse or whatever, where can they connect with you? How can they learn more about you?
Well, the easiest way to connect with me is on Facebook right now, right? So just personal friends on Facebook. And then I have a group that you have to be admitted into the group, but it's free and it's for everybody. So you just ask to be in the group. The group is called My Infinite Heart. And I do live Facebook Lives every day in there. I have a show on Thursdays in there. It's all free. And that's the easiest way to connect with me and just to kind of get to know me. Because I'm up there, right?
Awesome. And your Facebook URL is facebook.com/Dana, Dana.Heston, Dana.Heston, Heston. So if you guys want to connect with Dana over on Facebook, go do that. Join her group as well. What was the name of the group again?
My Infinite Heart.
Boom. My Infinite Heart. There you
Yeah.
go. Well, Dana, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, my friend. The amazing, the incredible Dana Heston. I love talking to that lady. I could sit here and talk with her all day. And in fact, I have done that before as well. And not only is she amazing, but like her husband's incredible. Her entire family's incredible. And it's just a testament to her and the work that she does. You know, I think that one of the most underrated parts of this game of entrepreneurship is really learning to master our relationships. And unfortunately, it seems many entrepreneurs kind of look at their relationships as a drain, you know, and it's like, well, you know, I'll just have to do that. I'll suffer my way through it, you know, but the reality is, like, if somebody's willing to take radical responsibility and do the work, and we talked about this in this episode, they really can level up their relationships, and not just their marriage, but like all of their relationships across the board. And as a result, those relationships can actually serve as the fuel for their dreams and their purpose and their passions. So I really hope this episode started to help you see how to create your relationships from a place of power rather than force. And I know one of the things that she mentioned about having a vision for your relationship and how it's more of a spiritual vision rather than an earthly vision. Those weren't the words that she used, but that really served me to think of like a vision, like for me and my wife. I've never really thought of it in the context of like, what would that look like? What would that feel like on a spiritual level? So it's really served me. I hope it served you. Anyway, hope this episode really inspired you in some way. If it did, I would love to hear about it. If it didn't, I would still love to hear about it. So if you will, simply take a screenshot of you listening to this podcast on your device, upload it over to your Instagram stories, and then just tag me at AJ Amyx, AJAMYX, over on Instagram. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Anthony John Amyx podcast. Until next time, my friend, I'm out. Peace.
Well, that's all I've got for this episode of the Anthony John Amyx podcast, but we have plenty more to help you become unstoppable in life and business. So head on over to ajamyx.com for exclusive resources, information, and tools to help you break through to a new level of freedom, purpose, and success. I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Bye for now.